Picture a Navy SEAL candidate freezing in the surf at 3 in the morning, a brass bell waiting in the shadows, and one word screaming inside his mind. Most people think the men who stay in that water are simply tougher than you. They're wrong. The difference is not the absence of fear. It's one ancient rule that changes who holds command when everything inside you wants to escape. Stay with me, because before we're through, you will know exactly what to obey when the world starts to burn. Welcome, I'm Marcus Vale, and this is the Mastery Files, where we fuse ancient wisdom with modern performance to build a character that's harder to distract, harder to break, and harder to fool. By the time we're done, we'll have bridged three worlds that rarely meet. We're looking at the leadership lessons of Admiral William McRaven, who oversaw the Bin Laden raid and survived SEAL training himself. We're layering in the 2,000-year-old psychological armor of the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, and we're grounding it all in the neuroscience of Dr. Andrew Huberman, specifically how breath and attention can rapidly change the body's response to stress. It's the 9th week of training, the week they call Hell Week, with 6 days of no sleep, constant harassment, and one special day at the mudflats. A candidate is lying in the surf zone with sand in his eyes, his teeth, and his raw skin, and his body shakes so hard he can barely hear the instructors over the roar of the waves. Beside him, a brass bell hangs in the shadows, and one ring would stop the cold and give him a hot shower, a dry bed, and a warm meal. Inside his mind, a single word is screaming, and that word is quit. Most people assume the survivors are just tougher than you. That's not the secret. McRaven often speaks about the mudflats, an evolution where candidates are ordered into freezing waist-deep mud for hours. And the instructors don't just watch. They tempt the mind with escape. They bring out hot coffee and donuts and tell the men that if just 5 of them quit, the rest can go inside and escape the oppressive cold. That's a masterclass in psychological warfare. They're trying to trigger a negotiation in your brain. Think about the last time you tried to build a new habit. At first you're motivated. Then the cold hits. Your brain starts negotiating, whispering that you'll do it tomorrow and that you've done enough for today. That negotiation isn't weakness, it's biology. Your sympathetic nervous system has taken over the conversation. The fight-or-flight system that pulls blood away from digestion and pushes it toward your arms and legs, getting you ready to run from something that, in this case, is just discomfort. Your parasympathetic system, the part that would calm you back down, stays offline until you give your body a reason to switch it on. The moment you negotiate with your discomfort, you've already lost, because you've let a survival reflex make a decision that belongs to your judgment. Panic is not fear. Fear is a biological signal, a spike in physical alarm that's supposed to sharpen you for a real threat. Panic is a mental breakdown. It's the moment your attention stops choosing and starts obeying the loudest voice in the room. Pain says stop. Cold says run. The instructor says you're not good enough. The untrained mind bows to the loudest voice, because a body stuck in sympathetic overdrive can't hear anything quieter than alarm. But the SEALs who finish Hell Week have learned a secret rule, an ancient rule, that changes how they hear those voices. When your life gets cold, when the deadline hits, or the plan collapses, most people discover they're not the ones in command. The noise is. Look closer at what's really happening. The ancient Stoics understood this long before modern special operations existed. Picture Epictetus for a moment, because his life makes the rule harder to dismiss. He was born into slavery in what's now Turkey. His leg was left permanently damaged, some ancient sources say by his own master's cruelty. Later in life, he was exiled from Rome when Emperor Domitian threw every philosopher out of the city, and he spent his remaining years teaching in a small Greek town called Nicopolis, far from comfort, far from power. This was a man with every excuse to call life unfair and mean it. Instead, he built a system of thought around the opposite idea. Epictetus wrote that people aren't disturbed by things but by the view they take of them. That's the opening of the Enchiridion, compiled by his student Arrian roughly 2,000 years ago. It's not a gentle suggestion from someone who never suffered. It's a statement about where the battlefield actually is, delivered by a man who lived through the worst evidence against it and still landed on judgment as the answer. Marcus Aurelius wrote something similar in his private notes. He said that if you're pained by external things, it's not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them, and that judgment is in your power to remove at any moment. He wasn't writing from a quiet study. He was an emperor under constant pressure, war, plague, betrayal, and the daily awareness of his own mortality. Again and again he returned to the same inner truth. You don't control the event. You control the command center. You control the judgment. You control the next honorable action. In plain language, the wave isn't the final enemy. The cold isn't the final enemy. The instructor's voice isn't the final enemy. The meaning you attach to them is. This is where most people break. Not at the event itself, at the interpretation they accept about the event. The instant the mind accepts the story that this is unbearable, or that this shouldn't be happening, the body begins negotiating for the exit. The exit isn't where freedom lives. The bell isn't release. The bell is simply proof that the mind surrendered before the body was actually finished. And before this lesson ends, you'll see exactly how that same bell shows up in your own living room. The ancient rule is this: control the next thing that's truly yours. Not the ocean, not the instructor, not the temperature, not the clock. The next breath, the next thought, the next clean action. Pain gets a vote. Fear gets a vote. Exhaustion gets a vote. None of them gets the throne. That's Stoic resilience in practice. But knowing the rule isn't enough. Under real pressure, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, and philosophy alone can't reboot it. You need something physical. The goal isn't to pretend pain doesn't exist. The goal is to stop giving pain command authority over your next decision. When you sense a threat, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, takes over. It floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. Your vision narrows. Your heart rate spikes. You're now in high arousal. In this state, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that does logic and stoicism, goes offline. You can't think your way out of a panic attack because the thinking part of your brain has been locked out of the room. You have to use a physical key. The SEALs call it box breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. A structured reset used in high-stakes environments to maintain composure when the pressure doesn't let up. Dr. Andrew Huberman and David Spiegel at Stanford led a randomized controlled trial published in Cell Reports Medicine in 2023 with 111 volunteers comparing cyclic sighing to mindfulness meditation. The physiological sigh is 1 deep inhale, a quick second top-off inhale, then a long, slow exhale. The second inhale maximizes lung expansion and helps offload carbon dioxide. The long exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, slowing heart rate. The results were notable. The controlled breathing groups improved their positive affect by 1.91 points on the standard mood scale, while the mindfulness meditation group improved by 1.22 points. That's roughly 1/3 greater improvement for controlled breathing, and cyclic sighing showed the strongest effect within that group. Which brings us directly to the 60-second protocol you can use the next time pressure rises. Huberman notes that the second top-off inhale is especially important because it reinflates the tiny air sacs in the lungs, which allows you to offload more carbon dioxide on the exhale. That signal travels directly to the brain. The threat is over. Return to command. Box breathing is a structured control technique for sustained pressure. The physiological sigh is a fast downshift tool for acute stress spikes. Both are levers. Both are available anywhere. In the surf. Before the meeting, during the argument, after the bad news, in the quiet hour when your mind starts manufacturing disasters. If you don't control your breath, you can't control your thoughts. If you don't control your thoughts, you can't control your actions. Here's the practical sequence that closes the third gate. First, name the signal without drama. This is fear. This is pressure. This is fatigue. Don't say I'm broken. Don't say I can't handle this. Just say, this is a signal. You're the observer, not the emotion. Second, slow and reset the breath. You can use the physiological sigh. Take 1 deep inhale through the nose. Add a quick second inhale to fully expand the lungs. Then release a long, slow exhale through the mouth. 1 to 3 of these can noticeably lower arousal. Or you can use box breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Repeat for 60 to 90 seconds. Either pattern tells the body the mind has returned to command. Third, choose the next clean action. Not the whole life, not the whole mission, not the whole future. Just the next clean action that moves you forward. That's the action gate, and it's where panic loses its grip, because panic feeds on abstraction. It feeds on thoughts like this never ends, or I'll fail completely, or I'm not strong enough. Action cuts the fog. Take 1 breath and 1 step. Handle 1 task and speak 1 honest word. Make 1 decision. That's why disciplined people can look almost boring under pressure. They're not arguing with the storm. They're executing the next controllable thing. That's not lack of emotion. That's mastery. Now let's make this personal. This lesson isn't about admiring SEALs from a distance. It's about noticing where you panic in ordinary life. Some people panic when they're criticized. Some panic when money gets tight or plans collapse. Some panic when they're alone with their thoughts for 10 quiet minutes. Because the pressure isn't dramatic, they underestimate it. But the mechanism is identical. The mind sees discomfort, assigns a catastrophic meaning, and the body follows. Then the modern bell appears. Distraction, anger, scrolling, avoidance, excuses. Another promise to start tomorrow. The Stoic answer is never shame. It's training. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of the mind you've practiced. If you practice panic in small moments, panic will be waiting in the large ones. When you practice command in small moments, command becomes available when the stakes rise. That's why the ancient rule must be trained before the crisis arrives. For the next 7 days, run the No Panic Protocol Challenge. Each day, watch for 3 specific triggers: fatigue, criticism, and uncertainty. Those 3 cause most of the panic in ordinary life, whether you're in a boardroom or standing in cold surf. The moment you feel one of them rising, pause for 60 seconds. Before you do anything else, score your control level from 1 to 10. Then use the breathing technique, either the physiological sigh or box breathing. Name the trigger, 1 short sentence, spoken or silent. Choose 1 deliberate action, Something small and specific, not a whole plan and not a whole life change. Then score your control level again from 1 to 10. Write down the gap between your before and after number. The main metric is simple. Ask yourself whether you paused, breathed, labeled the trigger, and acted deliberately instead of reacting. After 7 days, you won't have a feeling about whether this works. You'll have a written record. You don't build the unbreakable mind during the storm. You reveal whether you built it before the storm. The same event can destroy one person and sharpen another. A cold wave hits two candidates side by side. One says this is punishment and this is unfair. The other says this is the test and this is where I find out what I'm made of. It's the same water but a different meaning. One produces resentment. The other produces resolve. Epictetus would tell you the disturbance doesn't begin in the wave. It begins in the judgment about the wave. That doesn't mean every situation is good or fair. It means every situation demands an interpretation, and your interpretation either spends strength or creates it. That's why Stoic resilience isn't passive. It's the active practice of guarding the command center, your attention, your judgment, and your response. Marcus Aurelius returned to this truth again and again. The event is not yours to command. Your command center is. That's why a Stoic mind can stand inside chaos without becoming chaos. Every serious life has its own bell. The difficult conversation you keep postponing. The workout you skip when motivation disappears. The creative project you delay because it got uncomfortable. The truth you avoid telling because it might cost something. Your bell may not be brass, but you know exactly where it is. McRaven put it simply. If you want to change the world, don't ever ring the bell. The bell is any convenient exit from the standard you chose for yourself. If you practice quitting when the coffee is cold, or the traffic is bad, you'll quit when the business gets hard or the marriage gets rocky. You're training your brain to believe that the exit is the only solution to discomfort. But it's not the only solution. You can also train yourself to sit in the discomfort, discern and understand the situation. And this opens the door to opportunity, to optionality, other solutions. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should be like the promontory, against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. The promontory doesn't argue with the waves. It doesn't ask the waves to stop. It simply remains a promontory. The unbreakable mind isn't a mind that never bends. It's a mind that returns to command faster. When fear appears, you return. When pain appears, you return. When pain appears, you return. When exhaustion appears, you return. That's why the training is never finished, because pressure changes form. Today it's cold water and exhaustion. Tomorrow it may be grief, or betrayal, or sudden responsibility, or even success that tries to make you soft and distracted. The ancient Stoics never promised a life without storms. They offered a way to become the kind of person who doesn't hand the steering wheel to the storm. Pressure doesn't create panic by itself. Panic begins when the mind surrenders judgment, attention, and breath. Train the pause. Controls breath. Choose the next clean action. Don't worship comfort. Don't negotiate with every feeling. Don't ring the bell just because the moment got cold. If this gave you something to think about, hit like so more people can find it. Subscribe to the Mastery Files for more cinematic lessons in ancient wisdom, hard truth, and modern discipline. In the comments, tell me where pressure breaks you first. Tell me whether it's the body, the meaning you attach to the pain, or the moment you choose your next action. Also tell us what topic you want us to examine next. And when you're ready, watch the next video on the channel. The storm is coming. Make sure you've built the fortress. I'm Marcus Vale, and until next time, stay disciplined.